In 1995, Transformers was a fairly dead property. Generation 2 toy sales were fizzling out and they needed something to revitalize it. And that was Beast Wars. As a lot of you are probably aware, Beast Wars wasn't very warmly received at first by a good chunk of the G1 fanbase because they didn't want the Transformers turning into animals, prompting the phrase, "truck not monkey." While not everyone had their mind changed, what turned a lot of fans around on these beast-formed Transformers was the quite excellent storytelling in the Beast Wars show. Or was it called Beasties? Yes, the quite odd title Beasties is what the show is called during its run on YTV in Canada, because apparently having war in the title was a no-no. Personally, if I had to rename the series, I'd go with something like Beast Bots instead of the quite silly-sounding Beasties. Though funny enough, even though the name was censored in Canada, the actual content of the show was not, and on a lot of US networks airing the show, they made cuts to tone down some of the violence. So there's some silly censoring going on in both countries. I do like imagining the guy in the recording booth, though, yelling, "Beast Wars!" and them telling him, "Yeah, that was great. Now can you do it again, but yell, Beasties?" What? Hasbro approached Mainframe Entertainment based out of Vancouver to make the Beast Wars series as they were having success with their own computer animation-based show Reboot, and this would give Beast Wars a distinctly different look than G1. Reboot and Beast Wars are some of the earliest completely CG cartoon series, but despite this fact, Mainframe gave the characters enough style and personality to make them not look as bad as a lot of early CG. Now, of course, you can clearly still see a lot of earlier CG elements in Beast Wars, like some wonky textures, some scene lines still being quite visible, particularly empty backgrounds, and some clipping going on with characters. But what mostly makes up for these deficiencies is the extremely expressive and interesting character animation. And one of the things I really appreciate about Beast Wars is what a character-driven show it is. You really get to know a lot of the bots in this series, and they develop a lot as it goes. Bob Ford and Larry DiTillio were the story editors for Beast Wars and really helped form the Beast Wars world. And I think one of the things a lot of Transformers fans appreciate about these two was they actually listened to the fans some, which is pretty much why the series ended up having a direct connection to G1.
As we were reading the news groups, we were sort of lurking for quite a long time, just reading the fan reactions to stuff. And we can't help it, we're writers. We see little seeds here and there that we could sort of play in that actually help tie it into the original Transformers.
There's a line in the beginning about the Great War, which was just put in as a kind of general world-building thing, but after fans speculated that it was referring to the Autobot-Decepticon War, they decided to actually make it that. It's kind of amazing how well-crafted a lot of Beast Wars comes off, considering all the variables they had to deal with. One, which I think probably ended up being a major bonus, was they were limited to how many characters they could have in the show due to the budget. It cost a good amount of money for each new character model, so Hasbro had to be choosy about who to actually feature in the show. They chose figures with a lot of different colors to help them pop a bit from the backgrounds, and it was up to Bob Ford and Larry DiTillio to figure out how to incorporate these characters chosen by Hasbro into the show. Since they only had to select few characters, they decided to have the two groups, the Maximals and the Predacons, crash on a planet to separate them from the rest of the Transformers. But because Beast Wars had a smaller cast of characters, it meant we really got to focus and develop them instead of just having like some Transformer we never heard of drop in for like one episode and then never be heard from again. They also had to write this show around what the marketing team at Hasbro approved of, which kind of left one of the biggest twists in the series up in the air for a bit.
We didn't even know at the time whether we were going to put it in the past or whether it was going to be just a completely different planet altogether. It was very hard to get a solid decision from marketing because they themselves were trying to figure out exactly where they were going with this show.
The transwarp drive can go through space and time. We could be any place. anytime.
We put 2 moons in the sky figuring, okay, if we decide this is going to be Earth later on, we'll blow up a moon. And lo and behold, that's exactly what we ended up doing, and it tied into a huge story arc that made it look like we really knew what we were doing this whole time, and frankly, no, we were scrambling constantly.
You can tell they actually cared about what they were writing on Beast Wars, though, considering they tried to make all these story and character twists feel organic to the show for the most part. What also really brought the characters to life on the show was the awesome voice cast, and Mainframe used good old BLT Productions, also based out of Vancouver, who was hot off doing voice work for those Jet Lag Good Times movies. A little bit of a jump going from those to Beast Wars.
Optimus is insane to waste my talents on a futile hunt.
And this meant one of my favorite voice actors, Scott Mcneil, was part of the cast, and he voiced half the characters. Okay, like 4 of them, but it's 4 very distinct voices and very impressive.
One more crack like that, vermin. I will take you out the old-fashioned way. Brutally!
I would like to see you try it there, Dino Boob. Or should I say, lizard lips? Oh man, we're all gonna die.
No more fighting. Fighting gives Warsbonito a headache in his whole body.
And then, of course, Silverbolt, strong, proud, brave, and smart as a sack of hammers.
Gary Chalk was Optimus Primal, and this would be, of course, the first of many series where he voiced an Optimus. But I'd say out of all of them, the monkey was better than any of Gary Chalk's trucks.
Well, that's just Prime.
David K. was Megatron, yes.
Yes, yes, no, yes.
Who went on to voice other incarnations of Megatron/Galvatron through the Unicron trilogy, and then got to switch it up on Transformers Animated, where he was Optimus Prime. Ian James Corlett voiced Cheetor, who was kind of the Bumblebee/Hot Rod of Beast Wars.
If you ever pull a stunt like that again, I'll have your tail in a sling.
Okay, I'll never do that again. Until the next time.
Richard Newman was Rhinox, who's a bit like the Ironhide of the group, though he's a much wiser and spiritual character.
When a spark goes online, there's great joy. I don't think so.
There were a few episodes towards the beginning where Rhinox wasn't the second in command of the Maximals, but pretty much fit that role later on. Especially when he had to take command of the group when Primal was gone.
Stand down, Dinobot.
By what right do you command me? With Optimus gone, I should be...
I'm in a bad mood. Understand?
Rhinox was another character that I really liked and found it a bit of a shame he wasn't all that involved with plots in Season 3. Doug Parker voiced Pterosaur, who was pretty much the Starscream of Beast Wars.
Megatron is scrap! Yes, I'm your leader now!
Which I suppose makes it fitting that he also voiced Starscream in his appearance on Beast Wars. Venus Terzo was Black Arachnia, who really had an interesting character arc, originally being a Maximal protoform, but had a shell program installed before she's awakened as Black Arachnia to turn her into a Predacon. However, in the 3rd season, she ended up making the choice to switch to the Maximals.
I was a Maximal protoform!
This was kind of initiated just by self-preservation, but grew more complex. Megatron had a lot of problems with Predacons turning against him in this series, really. In the very first episode of Beast Wars, Dinobot switches to the Maximal side, which leads to an interesting dynamic, especially between him and Rat Trap.
Man, you know, it's your fault that I ain't kicking back on Cybertron right now, you overgrown stinky iguana!
I've done the planet a favor.
Scott Mcneil just really loved arguing with himself in this series. I find it kind of funny too. If you really think about it, Megatron must have had some kind of complex about Dinobot leaving him because he cloned Dinobot not once, but twice. And it didn't really work out for him either time. The first clone's death too led to a wonderful piece of dark humor as Dinobot apparently ate his clone.
He was such a handsome creature, and quite tasty.
You know, I really love Dinobot as a character and all, but that had to be a rather bizarre dining experience. Every season of Beast Wars had a bit of a different feel to it. You can tell in season 1 the show is in the process of really finding its identity earlier on. In this season, all the characters' beast modes are supposed to look like the actual animals they are based on.
The name's Cheater. What's shaking, cats?
If I may dust off a classic... Stupid surprise cheetahs! Now, the scale of the animals the Transformers turned into was really only correct for a couple of characters, as we didn't have growing and shrinking going on like we did in G1. And for the most part, the transformations made sense were based around the actual toys. Except when Ravage cameoed on the show.
Decepticons forever!
The Transformers Beast modes were mostly used as a protective shielding in Season 1.
These beast forms are to protect us from the long-term effects of the energon fields out there. We may need energon for power, but this is too much of a good thing.
Though some of the beast forms had their advantages for stealth, battle, or travel, they mostly went to beast mode to prevent energon buildup. Towards the beginning of the show, too, it got a little tiresome hearing the Transformers say maximize or terrorize when going to robot form.
Red Trap, maximize! Tarantulas, terrorize!
But as the show went on, they didn't announce it as much, so it felt far less repetitive. Season 1 had a lot more of an explorative angle to it, with both sides going searching around the planet they'd crashed on, and they would find weird alien artifacts. One of which being a Stonehenge structure, which was kind of one of the first major hints that this planet was going to turn out to be Earth. Besides it having a bunch of Earth animals on it, except for featherless raptors. What fiction Beast Wars is, right guys? The first season really developed the core crew of both sides, with stasis pods that are stuck in orbit dropping down once in a while, which usually introduced a new character. The pods were all from the Maximal ship, so they would all be Maximals upon awakening unless the Predacons got to them first and messed with their programming. Except for Quick Strike. I guess he is just gonna turn on the Maximals regardless. There's some characters that only really got featured that much or were around in Season 1, and one that I particularly liked was Taiga Tron. Taiga Tron was one of the early protoforms that landed and was voiced by Blue Man Kuma, one of those actors you see pop up in quite a few TV shows and gives a pretty awesome performance each time, and Taiga Tron was no exception. This character separated himself a bit from the rest of the Maximal group as he felt more in tune with his beast form and just really loved the planet and nature. As he had that lone wolf aspect to his character, it's not too shocking to hear that initially this character was going to be a wolf transformer. The toy Wolf Fang was originally going to have Taiga Tron spawn the show, but this got changed to Taiga Tron since they could just modify the Cheetor character model slightly to save money, as the Taiga Tron toy was just a repaint of Cheetors. Kinda wish we could have seen Wolf Fang on the show, but it did add a bit of a dynamic between Taiga Tron and Cheetor, with them both having similar beast forms.
Watch yourself, little cat.
Always do, big cat.
And we did eventually get a partly wolf transformer with the Fusor Silverbolt. So, I recall the first episode I ever watched of Beast Wars was Possession, because, you know, Starscream. This had Starscream's ghost, or Spark as they started referring to the spirits of Transformers as of this series, possess Waspinator.
Air Commander Starscream of the Decepticon Battle Fleet!
I know Air Commander is what he was called on his toys box, but he never once referred to himself as that on the show, so I found it weird he kept saying that.
Since when did Buzzbrain learn that move?
Since his exostructure was commandeered by the spark of Air Commander Starscream!
I think Starscream would have said something more like he's the true leader of the Decepticons, but I guess he was trying to sell himself as being more loyal, which of course he wasn't. This episode wasn't really a great use of Starscream, but it did help build the connection to Beast Wars and G1, and it gave Starscream a chance to betray another Megatron.
Starscream and Black Arachnia. I'll have both their treacherous hides. Yes. Oh, yes, indeed.
Starscream, no. Oh, no, indeed. Megatron, yes. Actually, this is Predacon. Beast Wars Megatron really didn't seem all that competent through a lot of the first season of Beast Wars. It's really towards the end of that season and through the rest of the series that it comes off as a much smarter character and more of a threat. Though he still did do silly things like pat his Beast Mode's head, play around in a hot tub, and wear a silly judge wig. But once they found out they were wrong, it was Earth all along in the past, and Megatron's plan was to alter the timeline, I thought he became a much more interesting character. Scorponok, no relation to the OG Headmaster dummy, was pretty much just a loyal drone of Megatron, who, along with Pterosaur, was killed off at the beginning of Season 2. And in Scorponok's case, I'd say it was pretty much because his spot was taken up by Inferno.
Inferno, aid quick strike.
Yes, my queen.
I was not aware you had given yourself a new title.
Every job for the royalty is a gift.
That part is major sucker.
It is really confusing as to why, out of all the characters, Inferno stuck around for so long. You could pretty much just take stock phrases from him for certain episode appearances, like, "For the colony!" because he just yelled about being an ant and burning things a lot. They did have him wise up a little as the series went on, but he's never super interesting. I think what I enjoyed about him the most was Megatron's apparent affection for him.
Royalty!
Inferno! Quick strike, you may lead.
Royalty? Why was I not chosen?
Because, Inferno, when expecting booby traps, always send a boob in first.
I mean, until Megatron killed him in the last episode.
My queen! We're down here! No!
Which is kind of weird considering Inferno was also clearly disintegrated at the end of Season 2, but then somehow walked that one off. I was disintegrated for the royalty! Not a big deal. I kind of wish, though, that they had killed Inferno off here and instead brought back Pterosaur for Season 3, as he is a much more interesting character. And they could have actually had Transmetal Pterosaur on the show like they were hinting at. Transmetal was an interesting way to update certain characters with a more techno-organic beast mode and give them a new figure. In the show, this was the result of the Transmetal wave morphing certain characters that got hit by it. The arc playing through Season 1 had the Transformers discovering weird alien structures made by the Vok, and this wave was caused by the explosion of their biggest one.
Unicron!
We have no physical form you could comprehend. We chose this figure of authority from your data tracks.
Yeah, I guess weird floaty skull things are pretty hard to comprehend. Earth was being used as a testing ground for these aliens, and the main characters of the show have kind of screwed it up, so they decided to just wipe all life off the planet, leading to the reveal that that's no moon, it's a space station. This led to Optimus Primal flying off in a modified stasis pod to stop the Vok from ending all life on Earth. However, Megatron was able to gain control of the pod and locked Primal in, and he died.
Oh, you Optimuses do love to sacrifice yourselves, don't you?
It was pretty interesting how they handled this afterwards. They don't reveal later that Primal somehow got out. He really did die there. And apparently if there would even be a second season was up in the air at first, so the jokey "the end?" really could have been it had they not got renewed. That would have been quite the Mortal Kombat Conquest ending. Luckily, Beast Wars continued into what I thought was its best season out of the three. The storytelling in Season 2 got a lot more complex, as did the relationships between a lot of the characters. Towards the beginning of this season, Rhinox executed the dangerous plan to bring Primal back to the world of the living by using the hole created in time and space by the explosion of the Vok's Planet Buster. He was able to send his spark out of his body and lead Primals back to where they had a blank sparkless protoform it could go into. This protoform was also mutated by the Transmetal wave, creating my least favorite looking Primal, Monkey on a Surfboard. I did really think though, it was a neat story twist to have Rhinox resurrect Primal in that fashion. Season 2 was also where the character Tarantulas really came into his own. He was in the background of a lot of Season 1 just following Megatron's orders, but now he started acting towards his own agenda, betraying Megatron quite often.
What about Megatron?
He will survive, or not.
They gave him the backstory of having run into the Vok before and wanting to destroy them, and that he wasn't a descendant from the Decepticons like the rest of the Predacons in Megatron's group. Well, the Predacons that weren't modified maximal protoforms. Tarantulas even completely left Megatron's group during Season 2, which made it rather confusing when at the beginning of Season 3, he was just working for him again. Kinda seemed like there was a scene missing establishing Tarantulas working for Megatron again. For a bit. In the episode Bad Spark, we established that part of Primal and his crew's original mission was disposing of Protoform X, which was the Maximal's attempt to replicate Starscream's indestructible spark. Wow, that seems quite unethical, though I do like them adding a bit of darkness and desperation to the Maximal's side like this. I wish this aspect of Protoform X who became Rampage was explored a little more and he held more of a personal resentment and felt betrayed by the Maximals, seeing as they created him and then just wanted to discard him. Though Rampage was quite murderous and apparently killed a bunch of Transformers on some colonies, so they're probably right to get rid of him. After Rampage has been incapacitated, Megatron is able to force Rampage to serve him by cutting out part of his special spark and putting the squeeze on it whenever he gets out of line. I thought they kind of jumped the gun on having this happen, though, because if they really wanted to establish Rampage as this unstoppable monster, they should have had the Predacons and Maximals have to team up for a bit to take him down. But forget Rampage, Waspinator is the one who really has an indestructible spark around here. He gets blown to pieces and crushed so often, yet somehow he always comes back. He's kind of the one you'd least expect to survive the Beast Wars, yet with all these characters that die during this series, he kept going.
Waspinator happy at last.
Speaking of death, there's the episode Code of Hero, but no one really cares about that one, right? Before the series started, Megatron stole the Golden Disc from Cybertron, which contains records on how Earth's history plays out. And now that he knows he's on Earth in the past, he plans to wipe out the proto-humans so they won't be around to aid the Autobots and help them win the Great War.
The human race will never have existed!
Dinobot, who has been struggling lately with if he did indeed want to be part of Megatron's plan of reshaping the future and if his destiny was his own or set in stone, ends up being the only one there to stop Megatron.
The future is not fixed. My choices are my own. And yet, how ironic, for I now find I have no choice at all.
He makes a heroic stand against all the Predacons, sacrificing himself to stop them from destroying humanity from forming.
Well fought, my friend. You saved the valley. You saved the lives of those who live here, and of those who are still to come.
They do such a good job with this episode, and Dinobot was such a great character that you end up feeling sad about this silly CG character's death. I'd say they did this death scene even better than Prime's in the movie.
Tell my tale to those who ask. Tell it truly, the ill deeds, along with the good, and let me be judged accordingly. The rest is silence.
And then immediately after that, we have Transmutate, a protoform that doesn't form correctly. It has limited intelligence, but is really powerful. Both Silverbolt and Rampage forge a bond with this messed up bot.
Best thing for us all would be to put it in stasis lock.
Do we destroy whatever does not fit our definition of perfection?
In the end, Transmutate ends up sacrificing itself to stop Silverbolt and Rampage from destroying each other.
Let him be. For the moment, we are brothers.
Jeez, enough with the comedy episodes, Beast Wars. Season 2 wrapped up with The Agenda, which was a 3-parter and that marked the return of the G1 cassette transformer Ravage.
After the Great War, a few Decepticons were granted amnesty. Most have retired, but rumor has it that one was reprogrammed and rebuilt as a Predacon.
Covert Agent Ravage At your service. In the name of the Pax Cybertronia and the Predacon Alliance, you are under arrest. No!
The Agenda is one of my favorite stories in all of Beast Wars, not just because of Rush and Ravage, but because of how it builds the Beast Wars world and starts the best element of the time travel plot. Ravage initially aids the Maximals as he's been sent there by the Tripredacus Council to stop Megatron. The Council doesn't want Megatron's agenda starting an all-out war with the Maximals or it messing up their own plans to rise to power. So Ravage has been sent to try and clean up this mess quietly. However, Megatron reveals to Ravage that he's been acting in accordance to a message his namesake, the original Megatron, had hidden on the golden disc. So
He switched sides!
then Ravage dies shortly after that. I call BS on that one. Almost everyone else in Beast Wars explodes like 17 times before they're actually dead.
Die-cast construction. It's a lost art.
If Ravage had only lasted a little bit longer, he would have found himself, along with all the rest of the original G1 crew on the Ark. Yep, this was the ultimate goal of Beast Wars Megatron, to get aboard the Autobot ship and make sure that times change.
The Great War, where the Autobots defeat the Decepticons, and thus their descendants, the Maximals, rule we Predacons. The ultimate risk for the ultimate prize, a day of reckoning with foes who made us slaves.
The fact they give Megatron the extra character motivation for his actions rather than just being evil is something I really appreciate. And I absolutely love how making it Earth's past that the Maximals and Predacons were on gave them this opportunity to utilize the fact that the G1 Transformers were crashed here and offline until the 80s. It just fit together so nicely.
Still frozen in emergency stasis, awaiting the moment 4,000,000 years hence when they will awaken to start the Great War.
Kinda makes me wonder though what would have happened if Starscream had just possessed his own body in possession. Would he have had to have battled himself for control of his past body? Though the Ark might not have crashed on Earth quite yet during the events of that episode.
So, we are now face to face. Optimus Prime.
Jeez, I figured that the Beast Formers must have been smaller than the G1 bots, but I didn't realize until this shot that they were that small. Though, I suppose this line sort of helps explain why they are so much smaller.
Archaic energon, does in one future you awaken and become the great leader of the Autobots. But time shall take a different track now.
So Megatron blasts off Prime's head, causing a giant time storm, which is really cool and all, but I do find it kind of funny when time has a delayed reaction to something.
The future has changed. The Autobots lose. You no longer exist.
With Megatron seemingly have won, it's up to an unlikely hero, Black Arachnia, to stop him. She was with Megatron because she was the one who had the codes for the Ark downloaded, but isn't quite up for being wiped out of existence. She had started seeing Silverbolt in secret lately, having developed feelings for the silly bird dog. But her actions here are what really start her arc towards re-becoming a Maximal, which she ultimately does in a new Transmetal 2 body. And speaking of new bodies, in order to save Optimus Prime's life, Primal takes his spark into his body while they repair Prime's. This mutates Primal once again.
It's time to transform and roll out.
Jumping gyros. Optimus sure learns a new body fast.
Yeah, well, what do you expect? He changes him often enough.
Megatron would eventually follow suit, taking G1 Megatron's spark into his body and transforming him into a dragon.
Enter the dragon.
Cheetor would gain a Transmetal 2 form in the final season as well when he gets zapped by the machine Megatron was using to make his Transmetal 2 Dinobot clone, which he had infused with his half of Rampage's spark. I enjoyed how they made Cheetor's Transmetal 2 form come in and out like a werewolf transformation at first. Season 3 saw the Maximal ship completely destroyed and them set up their new base at the Ark, which made sense as that's now the area they had to protect from Megatron. We also finally came back to poor Taiga Tron and Air Razor this season, who had got sucked up by a weird plant thing put on Earth by the Vok. I kind of liked Airazor too, and I thought that it was a shame that ultimately she kind of got underutilized in the series and suffered a really horrible fate along with Taiga Tron. The Vok decide to fuse Taiga Tron and Airazor into one being, Tigerhawk, and possesses them so they can go in person and stop the Transformers from meddling in time on their little test planet. They fail pretty spectacularly, but do end up killing off Tarantulas. Tigerhawk, now free of the Vok control, starts to regain the memories of Taiga Tron and Airazor and rejoins the Maximals. For 2 episodes, then they die! Apparently this was due to Hasbro telling them to put Tigerhawk into the show, then thinking that they weren't actually going to release the Tigerhawk toy and telling them to kill the character off immediately. But then they did release the Tigerhawk toy, but it was too late to change the story by then. Depth Charge debuted this season as someone who followed the Transwarp signature looking for vengeance on Rampage, who has killed people he cared about. He kind of reluctantly joins Primal's team, but doesn't care that much for him.
I've got to hand it to you, Primal. When you screw up, you do it big time.
The Preds will change his mind. Or make him into fish sticks.
I don't like him much either, but he's still Maximal.
I feel like there's some interesting ideas with Depth Charge that they really didn't get to fully explore due to him being only introduced in what turned out to be the last season. Plus, it's kind of neat that he is able to do both air and water missions. In the end, he does get his revenge on Rampage, but at the cost of his own life as well.
This ends here, Megatron. No more good friends will be sacrificed to your insane ambition. I swear it. No more!
Rampage's death also causes an interesting change in Dinobot 2.
My own spark has changed.
Yes, the destruction of Rampage, no doubt.
Ah, yes, see how little I care.
You are a real jerk, Megatron.
Yes, I know.
Okay, I'm going to betray you then.
Dinobot betraying me? Who could have seen this coming? Yes, when Rampage dies, Dinobot 2 seems to start getting the memories of the original Dinobot, which ultimately leads to him also betraying Megatron. A scrapped episode would have helped to explain why Dinobot 2 gets these memories when they're not the same person. In the episode Bad Spark, we are shown Dinobot apparently making a backup of his core consciousness, but it's never called attention to. Rat Trap would have found this backup and wanting to bring Dinobot back would have dumped this into Dinobot 2. This would have been a really interesting character moment for Rat Trap and would have added another layer to his and Dinobot's rather messy relationship. As it is, I guess you just have to assume that somehow the original Dinobot spark has started to enter Dinobot 2's body, especially as it's getting memories from just before he died. Megatron's last bid in the series to try and kill Optimus Prime and change history in what he hopes will be in his favor is rising the Decepticon warship, the Nemesis. And I gotta say, I love how Beast Wars gives such backstory and importance to things like this. In the original G1 toon, it's just the ship you see the Decepticons attacking the Autobots in and eventually make their base, but here they talk about how it was one of the most powerful Decepticon warships ever and really build it up. And despite Rhinox taking a back seat through a lot of the last season, he is the one who gets to fly a shuttle that they found on the Ark right into Megatron's face to stop him. The series ends with the Maximals using this shuttle to go back to Cybertron and take Megatron to jail. So while the Beast Wars finale wraps things up pretty well, there were still some loose ends in the series, and this was because Bob Ford and Larry DiTillio found out kinda late that they were being replaced as story editors and had to wrap up their storylines with the end of Season 3. I'd say given that fact, they did a really good job, as this feels like a fairly natural conclusion point for Beast Wars. But it would have been nice to see a continuation, maybe with them back on Cybertron. I mean a continuation that still felt like the same series, not whatever Beast Machines was. Beast Wars feels like quite a journey going through it. So much has changed by the time the series ends for these characters, and not just on the outside for a lot of them. There is some real growth here, which really makes this series hold up pretty well.
Discuss this review with those who ask. Tell it truly, the draggy parts along with the good.
and let it be judged accordingly. The rest is silence.
I don't like this movie, doesn't too friendly. This bootleg is so fake, that toy is gonna break. Phelous, don't let me down, you need to be around. Grab that chocolate pizza, I even like because I want. Phelous, so Phelous, bring on mortal comedy. Phelous, so Phelous, an animation movie. Phelous, so Phelous, what really is so fun? Phelous, so Phelous, what's your opinion about?
I am Taiga Tron, emissary of the book.
Shut up! Just shut the hell up!